Everybody, I see there are 13 people online. So you know me, Marianne Benziger. Peter Coldrake asked me to open the meeting because he has another commitment. I have worked both with him, Peter, and Michael, and the cross-cutting team to define the high-level accelerated braiding goals, so I know them pretty well. But also I want to remind you that these goals were not developed in isolation, but they build on the insights of the crop leads that were gathered and discussed in depth during the 2024 crop lead meeting in Dubai. So implicitly these goals build up on all your insights. So today's discussion is about trait discovery and deployment, and to make it brief, because Dorcas will go in much greater detail, I think the most important issue is that, like for goals number 1 to 3 that were discussed earlier, the key issue is really that trait discovery and deployment efforts need to be better focused, and particularly in the current funding environment. But even with the previous amount of funding, the CEG pursues too many traits, each with too little funds. And as a result, trait discovery and deployment efforts have insufficient impact on breeding. And this is also a frustration, I think, to you all individually. I mean, you all want to make a difference. So Dorcas will go with you through the key questions that crop teams need to address and also give you important information about how to address them. So I don't want to go more into a very exciting presentation that she has prepared and then hope for a lively discussion. Over to you, Dorcas.
Yeah, thank you, Marian. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for joining. It's me again. I'm pleased to talk with you on our goal number 4 today, as Marian has introduced. And this is, as usual, an information sharing meeting on goal number 4. We would like that the breeding teams understand what is goal number 4, what is expected, and the levels of engagement, and where to seek support with the cross-cutting team. We have seen this now for all the past goals discussions, the breeding strategy and how everything links together. And at this level with goals number 5 and 6 that we discussed last time, and with goal number 4, we are focusing on the breeding efforts that are focused on a market segment and the breeding schemes that are aligned with those breeding efforts. So goal number 4 in short is focused on a more mainstreamed, and prioritize trait discovery and deployment. And Marianne already mentioned this, that currently with across the organization, trait discovery efforts are applied on so many traits, many of which have very limited investment. Nina, I think some people are having trouble joining on the link. Rosa from SEAT has sent a message on Teams. Okay, many of those have limited investment, and this stretch of investment makes sure that we don't have a lot of good results that can be applied. And in most cases, most of the traits being pursued are also not quite aligned with the breeding pipelines, priority breeding pipelines, and therefore they offer very insufficient benefits to the breeding pipeline. In some cases also, even when there is some alignment between the trait discovery and deployment and the elite breeding pipelines, the breeding programs may lack a strategy in place to take up and use the outputs of trait discovery and deployment pipelines. For this goal, for support, you could have access some support from our toolbox. You could access support from Accelerate Discover cross-cutting team and from breeding resources. So what is the picture at the moment? We do have about over 160 traits being researched. And as we have mentioned, with this number of traits, then the resources are too scattered or too stretched to create any impact on the breeding programs. And we can see this picture now because of some of the information that has been documented that can be able to maybe help us see what is happening across our programs. By us, I mean all the breeding teams that are here. And that's just one value of having these things documented. You can see this is the baseline survey that was carried out before by our Discover team, which is information that is available. But we would like to digitize this a bit more in future. And I think the last slide is talking about that. But you can see that this gives us a picture of what is happening across the programs and how many traits are being focused on, and to some extent explain some of the lack of the impact on the elite breeding pipelines. So in the Discover space now, the main objectives that we would be working on together would be that first, all pipelines clearly define and document their trade discovery and deployment strategies. And these have to be aligned with the market demand. They should be scientifically feasible, and they should be gender intentional in the breeding portal, so that we can have a database where one-stop shop for the TD&D strategies as well. The second objective is that all pipelines use best practice approaches for highest priority trade discovery and deployment targets, including the stage and gate process, as well as having reliable high throughput phenotyping assays in place. High throughput phenotyping here does not mean the use of drones or things like that. It means that we can measure all essential traits easily at low cost and at scale, especially at early testing as well. And the third objective is outcome-oriented and informative KPIs are used so that they can drive our ambition on return on investment and the likelihood of success from the trade discovery and deployment activities with the benefit that they provide to the elite breeding pipelines. Given those objectives, it means that there needs to be a trade team in place to achieve those objectives across the different programs. And this trade team needs to support with several functions. It needs to be aligned and engaged with the elite breeding pipeline team. This should be the product development team. I should have changed that. And some of their functions include developing high throughput, low cost phenotyping assays for priority essential traits. Because if traits are essential for our target product profiles, we should be able to measure all of them early enough to make recycling decisions early and also to make advancement decisions. If we don't have assays for some of our traits, then the target product profiles are still not feasible. They help to identify QTL and haplotypes for major gene, for the traits that are conditioned by major genes, and to validate those across environments and genetic backgrounds. And once validated, they help to introgress and augment this into the elite breeding population. They also support the teams in developing low and mid-density genotyping panels, and care should be taken, especially for the mid-density genotyping panels, that they represent the alleles in the target breeding population. We've seen cases where there have been challenges of this, and the likelihood of success of applying either genomic selection or is reduced significantly if the genotyping platform is not aligned with the target breeding population. They coordinate routine genotyping activities for the elite breeding population activities and the product development team. They also mainstream QA, QC, marker-assisted selection, genomic selection into the breeding pipelines. And after the deployment of the traits, they don't just stop there. They have to help to track the traits to ensure that the traits are part of the final products when the products are being released into the seed systems. So what is our primary ask with goal number 4 is that these need to be focused. Currently, the research, both phenotypic and molecular, is taking place for too many traits, as we have mentioned, and this reduces the impact that these efforts can have or can contribute to the elite breeding pipelines. So how do we change this? There is need for teams to have discussions within programs and to come up with, of course, what traits. The traits need to be essential in the target product profile. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to put effort into something that is not essential in this case. And among those essential traits, we need to discuss which essential traits do not have a high throughput, low cost phenotyping platform. And with this, we need to discuss and give priority to the different traits and the responsibilities to develop those high throughput, low cost phenotyping platforms. The other question is, do we need better genotyping information? And this is also a discussion that the team needs to have and set priorities as well as assign responsibilities to the trait teams. And then the fourth question is, do we need better trait donors? And we need also to have a discussion as a team within a program and prioritize and assign responsibilities for trait discovery and deployment activities. The result from this ask is that the trait team and the product development team roles are well defined and aligned to enable impact in the breeding program. So what traits? We mentioned essential traits, and how can you access this, of course, in the breeding portal. When you go down here in the tools and reports, you find trait frequency report. And if you click on that, you get this text box where you have a drop-down menu for the crops. If you hit submit, you come to a page like this. It has many more columns. I only filtered this to allow to be able to be seen on the screen. So this is an example of banana, which was on top of my list. And a number of traits are here. So the name of the traits and the category, of course, it's essential to maintain or nice to have or essential to improve and things like that. And the number of times it is appearing in the target product profiles of banana and the area of usage of that trait as relates to the area that each market segment and the target product profile is serving. And you can see from here, we can be able to see that a trait like color here is an essential to maintain trait. It's very important in banana because it's mentioned in 26 target product profile, and it's serving about 26,000 hectares. So it's an important trait. So the next question would be, can we measure this trait in our population? And the other thing is, do we have enough variance for this trait in our population? Yes and no, then we can make other decisions on what action items to take, whether we do discover, trade discovery and deployment, whether we develop phenotyping assays and things like that. So for which essential traits do we lack? We know that phenotyping is prerequisite for all breeding and research. And this was actually raised as a priority by the breeding leads in an AB meeting that we had in 2024 in Dubai. And the ask from the breeding leads was to establish high throughput, low cost phenotyping for all essential traits. So this is the ask to the team: what are the priorities and the responsibilities for your trait team? And this needs a team discussion and come up with those priorities and assign responsibilities to start working on this. The other question is, do we need better genotyping information? And with genotyping information, we need to worry first with the trait architecture, the inheritance of prioritized essential traits. For simple traits, of course, we're looking for marker, haplotype identification, validation, and deployment. And to be used in the breeding pipeline, we need to have low density panels in place for marker assisted selection. And the trait teams need to prioritize having this and representative for the breeding population. Or are they polygenic, where we are looking at estimating breeding values using genomic selection? And we need to have mid-density panels for genomic relationship matrices. And these genotyping panels must be representative of the elite breeding population. So the team needs to discuss what are the priorities and responsibilities for the trait team to provide and improve the genomic information that is needed to make selection decisions based on marker information. The other question is, do we need better trait donors? That is now going into trait discovery and deployment. And we all know that a full-fledged trait discovery and deployment requires significant resources if it has to be impactful in the breeding pipeline. We have already mentioned that currently this is not the case, as most of this research only goes to QTL mapping and seeing the peak, and it stops there. That's just the beginning of it, because having a peak at QTL mapping does not guarantee that that is a QTL that can be used in a breeding program. So there's need to be strategy on validating that across environments and genetic backgrounds, and then being able to deploy. So to be able to have or to mainstream and focus the resources, there is need to make decisions between potential TPP traits and to prioritize. Of course, the teams know better about the traits to understand how feasible are the traits and impactful are the traits to be prioritized for trait discovery and deployment. And once this is done, then we need to aggregate the resources around the most feasible and impactful trait discovery and deployment projects. This is all geared into ensuring that we have more impact from TD&D activities. So to stay on the same page, let's have some definition. The trait discovery is the identification and understanding of causal variance for the priority traits from previously uncharacterized genetic variation. And we aim to come up as a trait donor as a product. Trait deployment can have two components. The first one is the semi-elite or elite donor development, which is moving new genetic variants from the trait donor, as we have identified in discovery, into an adapted elite background. And the product here we are aiming for is having a semi-elite trait donor that meets the core pipeline requirements. Then the other part of deployment is integrating with the elite breeding pipeline. And this is the introduction of a well-characterized priority trait from the elite or semi-elite donor into a broad range of elite backgrounds in the elite breeding population, so that we can develop elite germplasm that have either the native or non-native trait conversions. So when we are defining the TD&D targets, what are some of these things? Those things we consider? Of course, we already mentioned, and we continue to reiterate that it must be an essential TPP traits. It's not the whole trait wish list. The second criteria is that it must be insufficiently represented in the elite breeding population. And this is, as we said in goal number 5 and 6 also, we should avoid underestimating available variance, especially for quantitative traits in our breeding programs. We said we needed to monitor and not maximize. The aim is to monitor and not to maximize genetic variance in our elite breeding populations. And we have said time and again, for quantitative traits, it's quite difficult to run out of genetic variance. And in this case, more is not always better with genetic variance. That's why the gene bank materials are not always better than the breeding populations that we are having, even though they are more diverse than the breeding populations. And then we need to ask ourselves, how efficiently and effectively can we select for a trait? So if a trait can be more efficiently and effectively selected for using marker-assisted selection based by considering heritability, phenotyping, cost, stage at selection, if marker-assisted selection can make this more efficient and effective, then we can invest in trait discovery and deployment for such a trait because of the benefits of saving on phenotyping costs or selecting early or increasing the heritability of selection. Trait discovery and trait architecture, as mentioned before. So simple and polygenic traits, as it's intuitive, are different and will have very different implications and requirements when it comes to trait discovery and deployment. We know, of course, that for discovery, for simple traits, this is easier because it's easier to identify and validate candidate genes, while this is very difficult for polygenic traits because of the multiple genes that are involved. For validation and deployment, this is straightforward. For simple traits, it's challenging due to the small effects of genes for the polygenic traits. And you need fewer markers for simple traits. You need more high density markers for polygenic traits. So what should be the focus of trait discovery and deployment? The main focus should be on the efficient identification and deployment of major genes, and also focus on stacking of those major genes for improved performance, especially, for example, for disease resistance. It is important to involve the trait teams to understand what resistance is available in the elite breeding population against which races, so they can provide services as to track if there is need for new resistance that is needed and things like that. So the trait teams should be involved in especially understanding what level, what kind, against which races are available in the population to support the breeding teams to continuously produce those high-value haplotypes against emerging threats. For polygenic traits, they do not run out of variants fast once they are represented in the elite breeding population. So they are less amenable to TD&D, and this should only be prioritized for TD&D when it's absolutely necessary that we do not have variants, or especially, and this especially is because they would require more complex TD&D strategies. So to put together the TD&D, and we have said we have outputs or products out of it. That means that we do need a proper stage and get process that guides us onto reaching that product that we're looking for. And the TD&D stage and get process, as has been defined by our Discover team, has 6 stages. Of course, with the decision-making gets into each stage, and what needs to be considered are those gates into moving one into the next. This range from stage 1, trait scoping, up to stage 6, product deployment, and the different activities that need to be considered there. So as we mentioned, we need to have a trait team in place. So what is the composition of a trait team? As we have seen, it gives service to elite breeding pipelines, for example, in the phenotyping assays, for panels for genotyping and things like that, but is also giving service into the trait discovery and deployment. This team needs to be multidisciplinary. It incorporates molecular biologists, discovery breeders, quantitative geneticists, physiologists, pathologists. And what would be the responsibility then of this trait team, especially considering the stage and get process? We could have this as divided into the physiology component, which involves also disease resistance studies and things like that. And this can be more focused on stage 2 and stage 5, where development of phenotyping assay, donor identification, and validation phenotyping are necessary. And the genetic team that focuses on stage 3, 4, and 6, which is QTL, identification, integration, tracking, augmentation, and genotyping platforms. So for trait discovery, there is need to consider how to source new variants into our populations. And we do have several options for sourcing this variance. And these sources can be divided into these quadrants. The first one being having a source from an elite and adapted population. 1A is from an elite but non-adapted population. 1B from an adapted but non-elite population. And 1C from non-adapted and non-elite population. So 1C is the most challenging to source variance from, and it only needs to be used when it's absolutely necessary if we can find other sources of variance. And why is that so? Because sourcing new variants can disrupt the elite germplasm and eliminate cycles of progress for other traits. And this is why we also say we need to separate the activities of trait discovery and deployment from the elite breeding pipeline. Just to give an example, an illustration of this, you can find this in our toolbox, is if we have a population, let's say 100, and we have favorable alleles and unfavorable alleles at a certain frequency, and favorable alleles at that frequency of 0.2 in this case, improving the trait with plus 40, but the unfavorable ones are reducing the positive effects of the trait by 160. If we do recurrent selection, then we improve the favorable allele to 0.6, and this improvement improves our performance from plus 40 to plus 120. That's a huge improvement and has reduced the unfavorable effects, allele effects to about 80. But if we introduce new variants from a different population that might not be related and we don't know why, it comes with the frequency of the favorable allele and the effect at positive 5, but the effect of the unfavorable allele is at minus 95, and we mix it to our improved population that we have improved to a positive allele effect of 120. Then in the end, we end up with a larger population, yes, more diversity, but we do have only an improvement of plus 123, which is just 3 points over what we had previously. But we have then increased the unfavorable allelic effects from 80 to 177. So that's what happens there. That's why we have to have a strategy of how to introduce this. This is just to help you think through what you can do given the different sources of genetic variance if you want to deploy traits into the elite population. If you are coming from an elite but non-adapted, that is 1A, then you need to know if it is a major gene or has a major QTL. If no, then you need to just evaluate the genetic merit for the introduction. If it matches what you have, then you can introduce into the elite population. If not, if it has a major QTL, then you can use it to have marker-assisted back-crossing or forward breeding, after which you can introduce into the elite population. If you have non-elite and adapted, again, you need to figure out if you have a major QTL. If yes, marker-assisted breeding or forward breeding. If no, you need to introgress first into elite because the source is non-elite, and then there improve donors, elite donors that can now go into the elite population. If it's coming from non-elite, non-adapted, you need to introgress into an elite background. And if you identify major QTL, then you go marker-assisted breeding or forward breeding. If not, then you can, if not, then you need to improve the elite donors and introduce into the breeding population. So TD&D should rather focus on major genes. But what if it's polygenic? What if we need some polygenic integration? As we mentioned, first, most programs overestimate the need of additional variants for polygenic traits. We should check against that. And if there is really need for a polygenic integration, our team has been exploring what strategies are out there or what strategies would be more efficient to integrate this. The first one has been, the first strategy is on this publication from Aliyah, where the materials is sourced from wild relatives, gene banks, exotic germplasm, goes through a round of pre-breeding and then is introduced via breeding into the elite population. The technical aspects of this pre-breeding and breeding are available in that paper, we can discuss later on here. But we have identified a few challenges with this strategy. Of course, as you can see, the source of that diversity is too wide, which is both beneficial but unfavorable, especially for deployment purposes. It's not adapted, and of course, since it's coming from that source, it's low agronomic performance. We have also explored a second strategy through a project that is run by several programs led by CIMMYT in this case, where they have been evaluating environmental GWAS QTL from wild relatives, gene bank materials, and things like that. And from those QTL, identify a number of donors that together represent the target QTL that we want to integrate, and go through a round of bridging also and breeding. And the technical aspects of that we can discuss later. And some of the problems we have identified here is that we cannot control this process. No backcross, of course, can contain all the target QTL. And of course, we will still have some linkage drag, and we can come up with some backcrosses that have no QTL. We're exploring a third strategy from our team. This one that we still looking to answer several questions, but we think this would be the best bet for the moment for polygenic integration. And I won't go into details for time, but we're still asking questions: how many donors, how many elite parents, how many, and things like that. So this is a proposed strategy that is still under study and will require extensive simulation to answer those questions. And we are exploring ways of making sure that all those questions can be answered. The next question that gets answered normally here is, we work in polyploid crops, RTB, and things like that. So what should we do? The first point is that do not overestimate the need for additional variants, as we have already said. Because there is already a lot of variance at all loci for those crops. And so you don't need a lot of wide crosses. The second thing is that for these crops, the elite breeding populations have not been sufficiently close. They have been quite open. And therefore, the genetic mean in these crops is not too far off from the adapted land races. So the approach is to ensure that you start with the right germplasm. You can refer to goal number 5 and 6. And you should have, in the elite population, some of these adapted land races that are preferred as pedigree in your population. And for simple traits, or traits that are completely missing in the elite breeding population, or that could be selected better by markers, marker-assisted backcrossing is not possible here. And then the polygenic TD&D strategy number 3 that we are proposing above would be the best bet to introgress major genes into the breeding population. Remember, for this population is major genes, but using a polygenic strategy. And this would be slower and more complex. So this should actually be very focused on those traits that are very important. So to summarize, yeah, the ask is that we need to focus. We need to have this team discussions, what traits, where we don't have high throughput assays, which genotypic information do we want, or do we need new donors, so that our trait teams, the roles of our trait teams and product development teams are well aligned. Some of the key performance indicators that might be important for us to track our progress across the programs would include some of these as suggested by myself here. But how will we capture the CGS trait discovery and deployment efforts moving forward? We captured the baseline, as I showed previously, in Excel files, in SharePoints, but we are now moving into developing a module in the breeding portal that will align TD&D, that will be in alignment with this stage gate process of TD&D, so as to support our best practice application ambitions. And this will allow us also to extract KPIs as needed. So thank you very much, and I'll stop there. Okay, so I think we'll open, I can't see the people raising hands or not, so I think we'll open this up for questions and discussion. Do we have any questions or comments? Sorry. Okay, I don't see any hands up. Maybe I did confuse everyone, or... Okay, I was just going through the chat. There was nothing. Can anyone hear me, or I'm just talking to myself?
No, we are hearing you, Dorcas, and you didn't. Actually, it was really good the way have you summarized, and I felt like I was going back to class again, genetic class, and I feel like it's a really good point that the one that you bring about not diluting our genetic gain by introgressing or putting foreign material into or bring crosses. So yeah, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to see how we are going to organize all this information in the breeding portal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Paula. Do we have any other questions? And sorry for the problems that people had to join the link. I hope it did not lock. It seemed it locked out a lot of people. I can see very few.
No, I think there was a problem with 2 people and they were managed. They were able to join the meeting.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But Nia, this time was different. I was trying to log into the meeting, but it was asking me to have a Zoom account, and I didn't have one, and I had to create one, and it didn't ask me the same thing for the previous meeting. So I don't know if this time you created the meeting in a different way. I'm not sure, but I had the troubles to logging into the meeting as well.
Oh, sorry to hear that. We'll try to fix it for the next time.
Thank you.
Rosita?
Hi, Dorcas. So yes, like Paola said, it was really illustrative. I think all these sessions have been very, very useful and good to go through these times where we need to really focus on prioritization. However, from today's talk, I'm struggling due to those trait teams that you say that we need. And I think that this only emphasizes the gap that the smaller programs have, because for a program that is underfunded and with additional budget cuts and everything, it's going to make it very, very difficult to go through some of the work plans. And a trade team like the one that you showcased for many programs, I think it's going to be very difficult. So the prioritization will mean things will not get done at all, not only reduce the pace, but not get done. So I think that's a bit unfortunate, and perhaps that part of the talk doesn't reflect the situation of many programs.
I do have some comments, but I see Marian has her hand up. Marian?
Yeah, hey, Rosita. I think the question is from what perspective you're looking at it. And I think we are too often just looking at it from the perspective of one crop. Yeah. And you in your center, you have multiple crop. You have, you can consider to say, well, what are the priorities across the crops we are working on? Yeah. And how can we assemble effective teams? I mean, what does it help to do small efforts that don't go anywhere? Yeah. It's frustrating to everybody. So I think, I mean, what Dorcas's talk shows, it's not an individual's effort. It's really for crops and centers to come together, again, particularly given funding situation, and saying, where do our priority lay and where are we have the most impactful and the most feasible intervention for which crops? Yeah. So it's not a given to just look within a crop or within a crop and region, look across and assemble teams that bring these skills even across crops. So the call for change is not, you can only do this if you have adequate resources. The call for change is really to elevate your look at the higher level and saying, what is the most important? Where can we make a significant difference? Or maybe coming back to as well the move that the Gates Foundation is pushing in about breakthrough products. You know, the message implicitly is, don't try to work on everything. Work on something where you can make a real difference. And so if you say, well, my individual crop effort is too small, then aggregate the teams in the trade area and say, where does our trade team at our center can make the most massive difference? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Marian. Thanks, Rosa. Yeah, so ideally, Rosa, we mentioned, I think, I know that in your team you have already someone on molecular breeding, maybe the physiology part, but we also know that there is a physiology component at SEAT still. So how can we leverage all this into a team that can support most of these functions, as Marian has explained, within the center, across the centers? And when there are actually additional gaps across all this, I think then other high-level solutions like considering shared services for phenotyping might be considered. But I think if we reorganize ourselves across teams, I think it is possible to put the trade teams together more efficiently. Any other comment or question? Okay. So I don't see any other hands up. So I think I was worried that 1 hour would not be enough, but it seems it's enough. So we will stop here. And we will have, I think, our next series on the goal number 7, I think, in 2 weeks. That invitation will be sent later by Michael and Nina. And Nina will be sharing the presentation today and the recording. So I want to thank everyone. If you have questions, please reach out to us and we can discuss more. We'll also discuss some of this when we make contact with your teams in our routine engagements. Thank you all and see you soon.